Hey, everybody, it's Dave here, Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers, been commenting publicly on the Minnesota Vikings for over 2.5 decades apiece. It's been a long time, but we are anxious to see how this season goes. And today, we got a special show for you. Not only do we have our normal 3 themes, we have a 4th. That's right, 4 for the price of 3. Gotta love it. Theme 1. When the Vikings defense dominates the offense, is it a big deal? We'll discuss that. Along with, we'll go into the state of the Vikings position review, this time with my big round bellies on the offensive line. Gotta love that. Then we're going to hit up This Week in Vikings Land, and we're going to be talking about more training camp stuff because that's what happened this week. Followed by the bonus theme where we honor the great Jared Allen. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey there, buddy. How's everything in the great white north?
Oh, everything's fine and dandy. Civic holiday coming up here on Monday, so no work for Darren tomorrow. So that makes Darren very happy on a Sunday. Going to have a few beers, going to grill up some steaks. Life is good. How about you?
It's been great. I want to give a shout out to Forlorn. He made my evening last night. It was wonderful. I appreciate his gift.
Oh, what was the gift?
It was a selection of some whiskeys.
Oh, man.
Samples.
If you want to get in Dave's good books, send him bourbon or whiskey, baby.
Oh, God. It was wonderful. They were unique. For the most part, but it was a wonderful evening and enjoyed the shit out of it and even felt it a little bit this morning. That's how good it was. But it was good. Now,
well, sometimes you got to take a little pain when you have your pleasure.
That's right. And there's no biggie, No. I'm well trained up on that. That's not a problem whatsoever. Now, I want to welcome everybody that's joined us so far. We've got a ton of folks, and we appreciate it. Gary, Raymond, Chuck, Razzie, Vocal Vike, Rap. God, I love you too, buddy. R. Emmer, Two-Toned, the Drewster. And Drew and I were talking about his contributions once the season starts to the pregame show. That's going to be cool, and you're going to want to watch. And if there's anybody I missed, I apologize. But we're here to talk about your Minnesota Vikings. And as I titled this, Camp Intensity Rises. And it seems to have gotten that way this week, and we'll get into that. First, though, Theme 1. Intensification and domination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yes, Dave, with the pads went on Monday with Vikings training camp. That means we're a little bit closer to like real football and seeing and getting a better idea of, particularly along the offensive and defensive lines, how things are really shaping up. So, and that led to, more competition. The training camp practices being more intense because you're not in pads and shells and not just two-hand touching guys. And it also led to more, I think, real life football of the offense and defense going at it. And so what was really significant early this week was, again, that I wasn't at training camp, so me and Dave are just reading stuff, and Dave's sending me tweets, and I'm reading the daily reports from the various Vikings media to kind of see how things goes. But it was pretty clear that at least from Monday to Wednesday of the week, the Vikings defense was eating the Vikings offense lunch badly. The offense could barely get out of its own way, wasn't moving the ball at all. JJ McCarthy was having issues, inaccuracy, some bad throws, the odd interceptions, some of them off receivers' hands. But, it wasn't looking great for the offense. And so when that happens, particularly when JJ McCarthy up to that point had been having a very smooth, problem-free training camp, looking very sharp in all aspects. But when things got a little bit more real, it seemed that things went south for the Vikings offense, which leads to some fans, not me, but some fans thinking the sky is falling. McCarthy's going to be a bust. Yeah. The Vikings offense are they going to be credible at all this in 2025 with such a strong roster? It's led to some questions. And so with the Vikings and offense, battling for supremacy at training camp, the question becomes, how long, if this went on, how long does it take for us to be really worried about JJ McCarthy, and can he handle being the number one guy in the NFL, and also the offense? Are they going to be as good as we thought they would? Now, the excuses, there are some viable, excuses to the offense struggling a bit. Of course, Christian Darrisaw has barely played with the ones, starting to ramp up a bit now, but he wasn't playing much with the ones. And of course, Justin Jefferson is not playing at all. Those are two big losses for the offense, while the defense has been, they've had all of their guys at disposal. Having said that, when the things get real in the regular season, Dave, fans, the media, they don't want to hear excuses. They just want to see execution. They don't care who's in and who's out. You're not going to get much of a saving grace for that. You're going to still be expected to produce. And so a little bit concerning, or maybe was it concerning to see the offense really struggle early on in the week? I think that's what we want to talk about here now. I think a couple of things here that I think are important to point out is that, one, defensively, the fact that the defense looked really strong, particularly Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with the padded practices, I think that is a very good thing. I would be very concerned on the flip side if McCarthy and the Vikings offense without Justin Jefferson were shredding the Vikings defense that's supposed to be so good and added Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to that strong roster. I think that would be concerning, Dave, because isn't this defense supposed to be really good? Aren't we expecting it to be, a top 5 unit and maybe even better than it was last year? So if McCarthy, without his best wide receiver, is scoring at will, moving the ball up and down the field on this unit, especially when it's starters against starters, that would be very concerning to me, because I expect this defense to be very good. And for the Vikings to get into a deep playoff run, Dave, and to get to the NFC Championship and maybe win it, and get to the Super Bowl and maybe win it, they can't be a one-dimensional team. They're going to need a very good offense and a very good defense. So the fact that the defense was strong, particularly early to midweek, I think that is a good thing. That shows that this could be, to paraphrase Chile from 2006, we could have a kick-ass defense. And so I think that was a good thing. That's not something to be too concerned about. The other part of this, Dave, is that I like how JJ McCarthy had handled the early adversity in those first 3 days. You could see, him talking to the press, and I don't think he was blowing smoke up anyone's asses, because just by the way he reacts. But, he looked at it, he says, this is learning. This is where I'm getting better. We're looking to get 2% better every day. When things don't go right, there's a reason for that. We assess it, we address it, and we move on. And you want to be making mistakes now as opposed to when we play Chicago in September and beyond that. So I like the way he has handled it. Also, you wanted to see, again, what I was saying up into training camp was, what would concern me would be if McCarthy stacked consecutive bad days after poor day after poor day. Like we're not talking 2 or 3, we're talking 8 or 9 or 10. So he did really struggle Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But Thursday, Friday, the Vikings didn't practice on Thursday, but Friday he had a better day. The offense had a better day. Not kick-ass, but I think they were going toe-to-toe with the defense there. Yesterday, we heard he was really sharp. The offense had its best day. J.J. McCarthy had his best day. So we're seeing that improvement. We're seeing the ability to bounce back from tough days and learn from that and get better. And so I think that is the key thing. If McCarthy had 5 straight bad days where he's inaccurate, getting sacked all the time, missing wide open receivers for 5 straight days, then you might think you have a problem. But 2 or 3 not so good days, a couple of strong days that build off the bad early on, I think that's encouraging. And yes, you got to keep monitoring this. I think that also what we're really going to have to look at is those joint practices with the New England Patriots, Dave, in a couple of weeks. I think that is something to kind of see how the offense and J.J. McCarthy handle facing against a different team, against players they don't face every day in training camp and they don't see, and a defense that they don't face and see every day, and see how that goes. And even then, we have to be very careful about things, Dave, because last year, you remember when we played the Brownies in joint practices, Sam Darnold really had some tough days there. And there was great concern, I think, from some people about, the real Sam Darnold is showing up now. But then when we got into the regular season, he performed in a Pro Bowl caliber for practically the whole season. So I think the joint practices are important. You want to see J.J. McCarthy do good things, but again, don't freak out if things don't go perfectly. They won't, for one. And I think the only thing would be concerning if he completely fell flat on his face, and I don't think that's going to happen. It hasn't happened in this training camp either, even when the pads have gone on, which we've seen on Friday and Saturday. Today, they're doing shells, and it's going to be a light practice, so not too much to take there. But I think... So am I concerned? Not really. And I think that we've seen, again, McCarthy's ability to bounce back from poor outings and learn from that and get better. And that's what you want to see. And we knew that things weren't going to go rosy. And I actually would be very concerned. I think I'd be a bit spooked if everything had gone great up to this point, Dave, because that happens to nobody. So I am not concerned right now. Certainly it bears monitoring, but like Kevin O'Connell tried to do, I think on Thursday or Friday, he was going to, trying to tamp down on all the sky is falling talk and say, hey, these are learning opportunities. This is training camp. We're expecting JJ to struggle at times. We think that's actually a good thing in some cases, because you got to face adversity and learn how to build off of that and move on from that and get better from that. And JJ McCarthy is doing that. Does it mean he's going to throw for 400 yards in his first game against the Chicago? I'd love it, but there's no guarantee there. But for anybody who's like really moaning and groaning about the offense and JJ McCarthy from this week, I mean, hold the brakes a little bit there, Dave. I want to hear your thoughts on this and what you think the level of concern should be.
Well, always this time of year, the defense tends to have the leg up. They're generally better. And
why do you think that is? I not having played football, that's the one of these football truisms you hear every year. But I wonder, I haven't heard a lot of people say why that's the case.
Because it's defense is reacting to the ball, whereas the offense is trying to coordinate where the ball goes. Mm-hmm. So if you can react, and by reacting to the ball, it's not just the ball. If you're Jonathan Grenard, who's been absolutely off the chain so far this preseason and training camp, and you see, hey, I'm going up against Justin SKOL, right? Because Christian Darrisaw isn't in at this time. Now, Christian Darrisaw is working his way back in and has done a few reps, but mostly Justin SKOL. And I see Justin either lean back or lean forward or whatever. I'm reading those signs. And I know as soon as Kelly starts to move that ball, I'm flying off the line. And because I'm going against Justin SKOL, I know he's susceptible to an arm over, an arm under, inside move, outside, whatever it is. And boom, he's in the face of J.J. McCarthy. That's what happened at the beginning of this week. The whole defense, whether it be not just Jonathan Grenard, but Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave and Dallas Turner and Van Ginkel almost got himself a pick six, and the whole works. They are more in tune with what they're doing and what the maestro over here is forging in the Flores Forge for them to do. They've been together for some of them now 3 years, going on the third year. They know how to communicate. They've got the wise old heads at the front level. They've got them with the linebackers. You've got them on the edges. You've got them in the back as well. And so their communication is a lot better than an offense that's missing Justin Jefferson, that's missing Christian Darrisaw, that's missing Will Fries, even though he's gotten in as well, which is cool. And so they're always going to be ahead because it takes time for the offense to get those dance moves, if you want to do it that way. 11 guys moving in specific directions for specific purposes into sync. And that's why they do it. Plus, they're so good. The talent level is so high. Anthony, thank you for the super chat. I did see that. And you're right. JJ and Addison are going to give D's nightmares. And just like Culpepper and Moss did back yesteryear, yes, that's going to be a true statement. It's going to be fun to watch. But when we're talking early training camp, the offense is still trying to get everything down and get all the call signs and all the play, plays in, everybody lined up right, all that sort of stuff. So it's the advantage defense. And with our defense, it may be advantage defense almost all year. We just hope the offense comes to parity, which it looked like they were doing Friday and even more yesterday, which is cool as shit for the prospects of this team this season. As long as everybody stays healthy, TJ Hawkinson, knock on woods, we'll find out. But that's the reason why.
There was a comment there. Which I've been thinking about it actually. We're referencing Bo Nix and the Broncos last year, Dave, and you saw with the Broncos last year. I don't know if the script is going to be the same for the Vikings, but the Broncos defense really carried Denver early in the season and kept their heads above water, while Bo Nix really struggled early on and wasn't doing a whole lot. But as the year went on, Nix got better. The Sean Payton, as much as we hate him, figured things out with him. What worked? The offense ended up towards the middle half of the season and later in the season, they weren't a passenger on Denver's surge to a playoff. They were a contributor. The defense still was very strong, but Bo Nix got better and the offense got better, and they became again, they were a significant contributor to Denver having a strong finish to the season and getting a wild card spot. And we might, again, early in the season, McCarthy is not balling out like we'd love to see, but it could be a similar thing there, Dave, where the defense carries the offense a little bit early on until McCarthy really has a few games under his belt, has seen different things, has experienced some low points, but also some high points, and built from that. And Kevin O'Connell figures out what he can do, what he can ask of McCarthy, and what he can't at this stage in his career. So I think there are some parallels there that we might see from the 2024 Denver Broncos and the 2025 Minnesota Vikings. Of course, we're hoping that McCarthy is like lights out from the beginning, but he doesn't have to be from the beginning, particularly if the defense is as strong as it looks like they're going to be based on what we've seen in training camp thus far.
I agree wholeheartedly. And you'll get both sides will work into the normal routine, game routine. Not only game shape at playing at speed, but the routine every week of this is what we do on Mondays, on Tuesdays. And they come to work on Tuesdays, and Wednesdays and Thursdays and walk through on Fridays, et cetera, et cetera. It's good. And it's now Drew says he's glad Flores is causing fits for JJ. It's causing JJ to learn, because JJ gets motivated by being, in my opinion, punched in the mouth and embarrassed. So he wants to go, oh, no. I'll figure out how to beat you. And he comes back and does that. And I think it's absolutely wonderful.
And we have seen Flores throw the same kitchen sink at Kirk Cousins in 2023 and Sam Darnold in 2024. And they moaned and Cousins moaned about it. Sam didn't say anything. He just really, but they struggled at times. But you saw what they did in the regular season when they were able to play. Mm-hmm. Cousins played very, very well the first 8 games until he blew out his Achilles, and Darnold again played very, very well until the last 2 games of the Viking season. So I think there is something there to you're facing Flores and all the crap that he's going to throw at you, so that when you face another defense that doesn't do that, it's kind of like, I wouldn't say easy, but not as difficult. Like you've been through, you've faced a tough defense that throws a lot of stuff at you. It gets you ready for the real thing against an opponent come September and beyond.
You've been through the crucible, and now you have the confidence to go against anything.
Yes.
Real simple. All right, now on to theme 2. Our position review, the round bellies.
And long-term position review, as we're getting down to the end of it, Dave. We've done a whole bunch of positions where I'm looking at in the off season. Again, we do this for every position, but we look at it kind of short term. Who's going to go, who's going to stay, who the Vikings might draft at that position, or who they might bring in as free agents. Just looking at the upcoming season. This one, now that the roster has been pretty much made up, we're looking at long-term. And by long-term is not very long, 3 or 4 years in the NFL. But I'm looking at the guys' ages, their contract situation, and their performance with the Vikings up to this point. And going to get to, now we're finally getting to a position that is, just Dave loves, is the offensive line, the big round bellies. This is where Dave really, sinks his teeth into the stuff. And last week we dealt with the wide receivers and the tight ends, and I said, long term, these 2 groups look, the Vikings seem pretty set because their main guys are under contract for a long time. I think the offensive line is very similar. Dave, I don't know if you were able to get your graphic of all the guys. It's the offensive line, so there's a ton of guys here. But we're going to mention
and they cross over. There's some that,
yes,
I might have loaded as a tackle, but that can play guard and vice versa. Sort of deal.
I think that we're going to pay attention to 11 guys I'm going to mention. Some of the bottom guys like Bird and that sort of stuff, probably not making the team, practice squad at best, but let's get to it. I said long term, I feel that the Vikings look pretty good here, and there's a reason for that. When you look at Christian Darrisaw, your left tackle, you look at your Donovan Jackson right now at left guard, and then Will Fries at right guard. These are dudes that when you got up there, Darrisaw is not going to be a free agent until 2030. Donovan Jackson isn't going to be a free agent until 2029. And Will Fries, if he plays as well as we hope he plays, he won't be a free agent until 2030 either. None of these guys are older than 27 years old at this point, Dave. And so you've got 3 starting dudes who are locked up at least until 2029. And by the time Donovan Jackson, if he plays as well as we hope he does, he's going to be signing an extension somewhere in 2028, you would think. if he plays as well as he has. So those are three big building blocks, starters that you have under contract.
Potentially an early extension in 2028.
Yes, potentially an early extension. But I don't think you'd want, if he becomes a really strong contributor, I don't think the Vikings are going to want him to go into his fifth year, paying him the rookie max, and then having to deal with that. I think they'll want to get him locked up long-term beyond that. A lot has to happen in between then, now and then, of course, for Jackson, but that's the best case scenario, that he's like a Trey Smith there, and the Vikings lock him up long-term before he can hit the market at all. But I think those are three guys that are under contract and under team control for a long time. They're young. We know Christian Darrisaw is at his best. He's one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Will Fries played really well last year until he broke his leg, and he'd been pretty solid the year before. I think those two guys there, Dave, at their worst, they're going to be solid players for you. At their best, they're going to be excellent, and I think they are going to be excellent. And Donovan Jackson was one of the most highly regarded guard prospects coming out of the draft. So I think projections for him are pretty high. Again, they are under team control for a really long term. We look really good there. Even at the others, now, Brian O'Neill, not exactly in the same situation. I think, he's set to be a free agent in 2027. He turns 30 coming up here in a few months. Ryan Kelly in a similar situation. He's 32, so he's even older than those guys, set to be a free agent in 2027. So they're not locked up long term. And the Vikings might have decisions to make with them even beyond just after this year, because O'Neill's salary cap is quite substantial. The Vikings and Kelly's making a fair amount of money too. Actually, all of them are, except for Donovan Jackson amongst the starting five. Will the Vikings need to make some decisions, particularly with O'Neill or Kelly after this year? Maybe, or not, because the salary cap keeps going up and there's cap wizardry and tricks that the Vikings can use to get them cap compliant, but keeping guys that they really want to keep, which is Kelly and O'Neill. But even with O'Neill and Kelly, if we assume that they're going to be here, they're not going to be a free agent until 2027. They're still under contract for this season and 2026, along with your other three starters. So I feel that's a really solid, long-term to midterm for the offensive line. You got five starters, all of them under contract, team control for at least the next 2 seasons. That's a pretty good place to be. When we look at beyond the starters, even the depth, Dave, is young and under team control for, I think, long-term. You look at Justin SKOL is the only guy who isn't. He's on a 1-year deal. He's the swing tackle right now. Will he be back next year or not? Hard to say. It depends on how he plays. It depends on how other guys on the roster develop in that point. And those are the guys that are the Vikings are looking at to develop are the ones that are under team control for a longer amount of time. Walter Rouse being one of them. He's only 24 years old. He won't be a free agent until 2028. Michael Juergens, who could be your backup center, kind of guards, kind of a Joe Berger kind of dude right now. He also won't be a free agent until 2028. He's only 25 right now. Blake Brandel, he's been around since 2020. He's 28, but he's a good backup depth guy to have. He won't be a free agent until 2027, but he can play tackle. He can play guard. He started at both in the past. He's been passable at times doing that. He's a great depth piece to have for the Vikings, and he's under team control for another 2 seasons. And then even some of a couple of undrafted rookie guys, Dave, again, potentially could be under team control up until 2028. And the guys that seem to have the most promise here are Joe Huber, who played at Wisconsin, and then Logan Brown, who was at Kansas, and at one point coming into college was a top 5 prospect, was considered the best left tackle prospect coming into college. Those guys will be restricted free agents in 2028 if the Vikings want to keep them. So we talked about this before. That means that if they get to free agency and somebody gives them an offer, the Vikings can match that offer and keep them if they want to. Now, again, if those guys develop and stick with the team and say Juergens doesn't, or Rouse doesn't. Again, you got young guys under team control for a long time. And you got your starters, again, 3 guys locked down until 2029 at least, and 1 guy until 2030, and the other 2, O'Neill and Kelly, in the fold for 2 years. I just feel that the offensive line, Dave, the Vikings have invested a lot of draft capital in the offensive line the past 3 or 4 years. And this offseason, they invested a lot of cha-ching, actual cash into Kelly and Fries. And it's left us long-term looking, I think, one of the strongest long-term outlooks of any position on the Vikings right now. I feel really good about this offensive line. I think it's going to be not be a weakness like we have seen in the past. And a lot of these guys are under the Vikings team control for 3 to 4 seasons, which is, really, really good news, because we know how important the offensive line is to a Viking, the Vikings offense success, running the ball, protecting the quarterback, passing the ball. You got to have great line play, and the Vikings have not had that for over a decade or more. We complain about it every year. When's the offensive line going to be addressed? When's it going to be better? I think we're finally getting there, and the good news is that a lot of these guys are going to be around a long time.
Oh, without a doubt. And I think it's good to develop. Now, Drew, I did see your question. Drew asked, how long till the chemistry's built up with these guys once the season starts? Ryan Kelly, I believe, is the linchpin on that, and hopefully it will be just a few games. And don't tell me that, hey, they'll have it done by the end of preseason. No, but no team does. It's not. They don't get enough full on pads against competition that's trying that they don't know. So I suspect, a few games, but that's where the defense steps in and covers. But I do expect them to do very well in all of that time period, just not as good as they will be in game 4. It's going to take a little bit of time. And the longer the season gets and the less the preseason gets, the more and more we're going to see of this. Everybody complains that the first couple of weeks looks sloppy and whatever. That's because everybody's suffering the same, restrictions on who gets to play, how long, et cetera, during the preseason. And we watched the game on Thursday night between the Kitties and the Chargers. All we were watching basically was, insurance salesmen.
Yeah.
That was it. You weren't seeing starters. So it's going to take a while to see how long they do. But boy, has it been a long time since we've had a decent offensive line. And this looks it for the first time in a long time. If we talk about, Kirk Cousins always whined and complained or put out the story that, if it wasn't for the offensive line, well, I think he had some, contributions to that, his failures as well. But since the 2010s, we've had a slew of underperformers on the line, be it TJ Clemmings, even Mike Remmers, when he was brought in, didn't star. And then we had the likes of Willie Beavers and Drew Samia. And you can't tell me that this line is not so much better than those guys. We can see it. It is going to be an improvement. We talked about, defensive domination in the first theme. Well, did you also hear about the comments on how Will Fries drove somebody 15 yards downfield, opening a block for Jordan Mason? Drove him 15 yards against the first D. Hell yeah. Now, first D's also got the best of Will on a couple of plays, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get fully in sync. And like I said, it's going to take the whole offense time to do that, whether it be J.J. McCarthy, the O-line, getting all the wide receivers, the weapons all in sync and gelled. But we've got, I think, an elite defense, and I mean elite, then it's not going to matter that they're going to take that time. And we've got the lighter part of the schedule at the very beginning. So I think it's going to be good. But I do like you mentioned, that some of these young guys are locked up for a while, or could be if they develop.
Yeah, that's right. The Vikings have the ability to keep them long term if they want to, and if those young players prove that they're worthy of being kept around long term. If not, we will adjust, whether it's free agency or drafting guys, that sort of thing. But yeah, you're right. The depth on us, the depth that we have is young and under team control for a long time, and hopefully they won't be pressed into service too long before they're ready.
I want to ask, I'm seeing a whole bunch of gifted memberships. Who did the gifting? I missed it.
Anthony McDaniel did it.
Wow. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate that. You guys rock. Absolutely rock. And we've got stuff coming up. So hopefully it's worth it. Matter of fact, there'll be something new coming out tomorrow. You'll have to stay tuned. It's a secret. But I think I love the direction this O-line's going, and even the old two, Kelly and O'Neill, could still get extensions on top of what they already have, because a good old lineman will play to his mid-30s.
Yeah, O'Neill in particular, who is still 29. Like, if you look at guys like we've said it before, Trent Williams, and you can use a few other, other
Drew and Ted and Chris. Appreciate it.
Going into
your show.
Yes, we do. But a guy like Trent Williams, who's going into, was he 38 or 39, still playing, still considered one of the best 3 left tackles in the NFL. And there's other examples of guys in their mid-30s, like you said, who have been able to play still very well.
That obviously was from Toonces, I believe. She wants to hear you talk Canadian.
I don't know how. I just talk. If it doesn't sound Canadian, I don't know what to tell you.
What about something?
I'll bring that in. I don't know if I say a boot. No, really? I think I say about.
Well, there's sometimes when I catch it, but
yeah, not as often as I misspell Mekhi Blackman, but
yeah. All right. Well, that's the O-line, and we're done with that. We appreciate that. So, all right. Now on to theme
3.
Theme 3. This week in Vikings land.
Which is really this week in Vikings training camp land, because that's what this is all about. When we're getting daily reports, hourly reports about the Vikings and who is looking good and who isn't on this. So I wanted to mention a bit about that and what I've been reading and what seems significant. We talked a bit about J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings offense and the struggles with the defense early on, picking up. That's the number one thing that we're concerned about, right? And that's going to continue. But, a few other things, I guess, that are random stuff. Justin Jefferson being out, that has given other Vikings receivers a chance to step up and see who might be willing to not only take a roster spot, but actually play maybe a somewhat significant role on the Vikings offense in 2025. And what has been what I've seen consistently is that Lucky Jackson, former UFL player, has been the guy who has been running with the ones now that Jefferson has been out. We're not hearing a lot about Rondale Moore lately, not hearing a lot about the rookie Ty Felton. Lucky Jackson, we are hearing a lot about. And, a little bit early to say what this all means. Last year, Tristan Jackson was sort of the Lucky Jackson of the Vikings wide receivers. He looked really, really good in training camp, made a ton of plays in preseason. He made the roster, and then he didn't catch a pass the whole regular season and wasn't really dressed for, was only dressed for a handful of games. So I think right now Lucky Jackson is looking pretty good, although it's still early to earn a roster spot. What does that mean? Will he have a significant role on the offense? Not too sure. Again, based on what Tristan Jackson did last year, he didn't end up having any impact on the Vikings offense. And maybe Lucky Jackson is the same, but at least right now, Lucky Jackson's been one of the standouts of training camp on the offense, and we haven't been hearing a lot about that. Doesn't mean Rondale Moore is going to get cut. Ty Felton's certainly making the team, and it's okay to me if Felton doesn't have a big impact this season, because I think he's a draft and develop kind of guy that we're going to see the best out of him. If we are, it's going to be in 2026 and 2027, maybe not in 2025. Although it happens in 2025, Dave, all for it. But Dave, that is one. Another guy who has been standing out, we've been hearing a lot about, has been Dwight Nudie McLaughlin, the undrafted rookie cornerback, building on his strong training camp and preseason last year. He's even stepped it up a notch. We're hearing about all kinds of pass breakups, sticky coverage. He intercepted passes in 3 consecutive practices this week. He is building on what he did last year, Dave. And for a guy who there was questions about, does he have a roster spot or not? Right now, looking really good for Nudie McLaughlin. He's going to have to follow that up in preseason because he's going to play a lot, and he's going to have to show that the same playmaking, ball intercepting skills he's shown the previous training camp and preseason and this preseason. But right now, it's looking good for him to make a roster spot, and making Vikings fans feel good about his ability to be a competitive corner if he has to play, if there's injuries to the Vikings. Because, Dave, I worried about the depth of this cornerback room from the beginning of the offseason, and it's still a wait and see for me, but things are looking better on the cornerback based on what we've been hearing from how a lot of them are performing, whether it's Okudah and Isaiah Rodgers, and now McLaughlin, and even Mekhi Blackman. But McLaughlin looking good to make the roster. I know people are jazzed about Zamiah Vaughn and think that he's got a lot of promise. I don't think the Vikings, Vaughn could be a guy you could get on your practice squad, even if he doesn't make the team, depending on stuff. But I feel...
Depends how many corners they keep.
Yes. They might only keep 5, in which case... McLaughlin might not.
Well, I'm thinking at 5, it's probably Vaughn goes to practice squad if they try that. Because I'm thinking you got your starting 3 with Murphy, Isaiah, and then Okudah, and then it comes Nudie and Vaughn are there behind Blackman. Blackman would be number 4. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. Now I'm also heard a little birdie say that even though Dwight McLaughlin has stood out, there's still some things needs work with, per Brian Flores. Cool. Work with him.
Yes.
So,
but I think when a guy is intercepting passes regularly and deflecting passes regularly, you can overlook a few of the things that he needs to get better at because he's got those ball skills, as opposed to somebody who maybe just lets everybody complete passes on them and then rallies to tackle them play after play after play. Maybe they don't get beat deep, but they don't do a whole lot to prevent passes from getting completed on them either. Anyway, McLaughlin's been an early star on the defense, that's had lots of players stand out. And another one of them has been Theo Jackson. we've heard for like 3 straight training camps about Jackson and how he shows and makes plays in preseason and training camp, and he continues to do that. And it's a little bit like we're not quite sure what Theo Jackson's role is going to be with this Brian Flores defense this year, because the Vikings seem to be playing Josh Metellus alongside Harrison Smith as the 2 safeties. We know the Vikings and Brian Flores used 3 safeties a lot last year and the year before, but that's when Cam Bynum was around, and that's when they had Smith and Metellus. They don't have Bynum anymore. Was Theo Jackson going to be used in a Bynum role, or was Metellus going to do that and Jackson was going to be more the guy covering guys? We don't know that yet, Dave. What we do know, though, is that Jackson continues to make plays at training camp, and it's got to the point where can the Vikings afford not to have Theo Jackson on the field at some way, because the guy just seems to be so good at making plays. They call him the closer in the secondary because of his ability to make big plays at
on the ball.
Big time.
Yep.
Yeah. So really bears watching about Theo Jackson, and how is he a 800, 900 defensive snap guy this year, or is he a 300, 400 defensive snap guy this year, or somewhere in between? I'm getting the feeling it's going to be somewhere in between, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about Theo Jackson and how good he's looked in the 2025 season and how important he is to the Vikings defense as the season progresses.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he's just lacked opportunity in previous years. Not
we're talking about him as a closer, and how do they use him? With Metellus looking to take on base packages Bynum's role, right, next to Harrison.
Yes.
Well, I think it's just like with the outside linebackers in Dallas Turner and the defensive line, how they set it up. It gives B-Flow all these different options, and he gets to dial it up, because it's almost like having, I got 3 starters at safety. I got 3 starters at edge. I've got a defensive line that can go against the run and go against the pass, mix and match. We're good. I've got linebackers that know how to shoot the gap and go run through a guard's face. And I've got corners now. One slides in, the other one comes in plays the outside. We've got backup if we need that, if somebody gets hurt. I think it's wonderful. And I think it's going to cause offensive coordinators absolute fits. Because they're going to go, all right, we're planning on these 2 guys being back there and these, 2 edges being out there and this and that, and then suddenly they're going to see something different. I think it's great. And you're going to get like Ryan Kelly early in practice going, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell going, I haven't a clue either. And you wonder why the defense dominates.
Mm-hmm. Freddie's asking me if after Murphy and Rogers, are we pretty thin at cornerback? I have stated in the past that in previous shows that yes, I would have liked the Vikings to add a more seasoned, proven veteran to that group. And I think what I've been hearing out of training camp so far is maybe less concerned about that right now because of the way Okudah seems to be playing. And Okudah, it sounds like right now the Vikings, he's the number 3 cornerback right now. Like there is not a competition between him and Mekhi Blackmon. He actually is the number 3 guy, and that's okay. I know Okudah's track record is very, very poor, but Matthew Collar made, I think, an interesting point last week in one of his things where he was talking about this situation. He was saying, if you think back to Shaq Griffin last year, when the Vikings signed Shaq Griffin, he had been released by I think it was Jacksonville released him, and then he got picked up by Houston, or Houston released him. Anyway, he'd been released the previous year. He'd played on 2 teams, and then he came in and signed with the Vikings and played pretty solidly. So maybe it's this defense. It does something to cornerbacks. It makes them play, or the way Flores uses them. If Flores is able to play to the strengths of Okudah, which is like getting hands on guys and messing them up and being physical and roughing them up, all fine and dandy. We shall see. I remain a little bit skeptical, but I'm not as worried about the cornerback room right now based on what I've been hearing as I was even 2 or 3 weeks ago. But I should also say that the Vikings still have the ability to add to the cornerback room if they have to. Now, Mike Hilton got signed recently, so he's one less veteran corner with a proven track record that the Vikings can pick up, but there are other guys. Maybe you'd even bring back Fabian Monroe, who was okay in his role. I don't, but those are my thoughts on that. A few other things about training camp. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Of course, we were really, Vikings fans, very interested, enthused to find out how Flores is going to use these guys and how good are they going to look, because they are a little bit older. They did have injuries last year. There are some question marks, but we've been hearing very good things about them pushing the pocket up the middle. And Hargrave in particular has been a menace to the offensive line, and love to hear that. I can't wait to see how Flores is going to use these guys and keep them fresh, but keep them effective. Also, great news. We're hearing about Dallas Turner. We heard about how, he looks so much bigger, and the coach is praising about how he attacked the offseason. But again, we hear these stories every offseason, Dave, about guys in the best shape of their career. They're primed for a great season, and then nothing happens. Well, Turner is making plays in training camp. He is blowing up guys. He's in coverage. He's rushing the passer. He's getting, fake sacks. Like, he looks like he's ready to take that step up. And if he is, when you look at the way Jonathan Grenard in particular has been in this training camp, he has been unblockable, what we're hearing so far, on a mission. So if you got the additions of Hargrave and Allen balling out, Turner taking a big step, Grenard, who has been unblockable so far, and then Van Ginkel's also been mentioned. We know he's going to be doing Van Ginkel things. Could be a very scary front seven for the Vikings that's going to be creating havoc for every quarterback that faces them this year. And I cannot applaud that enough, Dave.
Especially the one on Monday night that we open against. Hopefully he ends up in the fetal position, crying to his mother.
With his, green fingernail, painted fingernails or whatever.
Blue. They were lying blue on one picture I saw, which I thought was
offensively, not as much people that we've been hearing about, although that might change, particularly if the offense is finally getting it, which they appear to do on Saturday. But Jordan Mason, been reading some very good things about him. Seems every practice we are reading about him breaking off explosive runs, even when the offense is struggling. And I talked about how I was a wait and see on his pass catching abilities because he hadn't caught a lot of passes in San Francisco. And the scouting report on him was that he's not natural pass catcher. Well, Wes Phillips was bragging about how natural he looks catching passes. That doesn't seem to be an issue. Pass protection doesn't seem to be an issue. I think that Mason, we thought that there might be a 60-40 split between Mason and Aaron Jones, with Aaron Jones getting like 60% of the carries or offensive snaps. I think the way Mason sounds, we knew Mason had a very good year last year. I think this could be closer to a 50-50 split this year as far as playing time, which we have never seen in the KOC era, KOC administration with the Vikings, with running backs. And that could be very, very good for Aaron Jones. It'll keep him nice and fresh and explosive towards the end of the season. The same with Mason. I'm liking what I'm hearing about Mason, waiting to see what he's going to do in preseason. I suspect he might not play a ton there, but Mason sounding very good to me. Some not so good things, though. A couple of last things to mention about that is I think time to monitor or continue to monitor the backup quarterback situation and cringe place kicker. But getting back to the backup quarterback position, I guess Howell yesterday on Saturday had his best day yet, but he has been just fucking brutal up until that point. Can't complete a pass, going 3 and out on all kinds of team drills, throwing multiple interceptions. It is not looking good for Sam Howell. They actually put Brett Rippon in for some of the reps Friday at the number 2 quarterback because Howell threw another interception. And then I think Rippon threw an interception. So what are the Vikings going to do here? Again, beat writers are starting to sound alarms that this cannot continue. The Vikings cannot continue to see this without making a move. I said 2 weeks ago that I think they're going to let it ride out like they did in 2022. And if they're not happy with what they see, they'll make a deal then. I still think that's the case, but I did have, I wouldn't say high hopes, but I did feel that I did like the Howell move in the draft, and we didn't give up a draft pick for him. We just we dropped down in draft position. So you didn't give up a lot to get him, but it would be a bit of a bummer if the Vikings cut him because he's just been brutal, which he has been so far. So he's got to pick it up. Maybe we're going to see that. Drew, as far as Reichard going, yesterday he missed 2 kicks, 40 yards, 40-yarder. Inside 40. There was a couple others that barely went through. And the previous couple of days, he has not had a strong camp from what I'm reading. And he just, Dave, remember how he was just money until he had injured his quad. And he doesn't seem like he's been right since then. I still feel pretty good about Reichard. And, he had a long history in high school and at Alabama of being a lights out kicker. That just doesn't go away. But very concerning to hear that he's struggling in camp now. And Vikings fans have seen this movie over and over and over of a place kicker being
to the same side too.
Yeah.
Wide left. What is with Minnesota kickers and wide left?
Whether it's Blair Walsh or somebody else, we had just not had very good success with kickers. And so this is something to bear watching because place kicker, even though the Vikings drafted Will Reichard in the 6th round, even though, again, highly decorated, probably the most decorated college kicker in a long time, a place kicker in the NFL, 1 or 2 bad games that cost your team, you're the result that they lose. That is all that is needed for them to cut bait and move on from you. And so Will Reichard, maybe a little early
then you
to
go
panic,
on to someplace else and become an all-pro.
Well, yes, like
and
Daniel
Minnesota
Carlson.
looks stupid as usual when it comes to kickers.
But something to watch out for from him if he continues to struggle when you've got a team that's kind of similar to 2018, right? High expectations for the Vikings right now. If you've got a place kicker who really, shits the bed in 1 or 2 games and you lose when you should have won because the kicker couldn't put her between the uprights, maybe the Vikings make, I don't want to, like a panic move and cut him. A little bit early to get into that, but not really great news that he is struggling in training camp so far, particularly last year when he was like banging them from 50 plus.
Everywhere on the field, he was hitting them.
Yeah. Fuad Reves, Drew says. Yes. Fuad would probably be in his mid-60s now. So don't know if he'd have the leg to kick those 50-yarders, but hey. And Dan Meyer, I wouldn't bring him back. He was terrible when he was in his prime.
Delton, I did see your question way back ago about where would you take the spots, and we might cover that this week or next, but we'll get to it, especially when we get to our competition between Darren and I versus Tyler on predicting our final 53s.
But there you go. That's all the This Week in Vikings training camp land for you.
Yep. And now on to the bonus round, theme 4. And I have no music to it. Or at least it didn't link. Oh, well. This one, we are going to honor the newest Hall of Famer, Mr. Jared Allen.
We did tease this out last week, Dave. Jared Allen inducted into the Hall of Fame yesterday. And, so we did want to honor Jared Allen today on our show because, I still remember quite clearly that day in April. It was April 22nd, 2008, when the Vikings traded for Jared Allen.
I remember it exceptionally well.
And they gave up quite a bit for him. A first rounder, 2 third rounders, and then they swapped 6-round positions for Allen. And in case you're wondering, those players that the Chiefs ended up, so it was quite a haul that the Vikings gave up to get Allen. But
before you get there, why do I remember it so much?
I don't know, Dave.
I've told this story.
I can't remember the story, though.
At the time, I ran Loof's Locker Room. Had the website.
Oh,
I had an insider at Winter Park.
Oh, now I'm starting.
I published the story to the web 15 minutes before Mike Florio got it.
The big scoop for left.
It was the only time I've scooped anything like that. And, you know, it was all downhill after that. But it is, you know, I tried to go back in the Wayback Machine and it's not showing it because the server that Loof's Locker Room resided on Wayback doesn't exist anymore. And, but that was my only claim to fame, was scooping this and getting it out national before anybody else did it. And I beat Florio to it.
Well done.
And Florio
Dave.
and I were talking at the time.
Yeah. Well, that is a good story. I gotta say, sports journalism at its finest by Dave Stefano. But if you kind of remember, just to recap, who the Chiefs ended up picking with those draft picks, it was like left tackle Brandon Albert. They picked up Jamal Charles, running back. Another guy was Dewan Moses, was a safety, and then a Robertson guy with their pick. I'm not sure what position he played, but really out of those four, Jamal Charles ended up being a very good player, but the other three didn't really have the amount to much.
The Brandon Albert went on to be a Pro Bowler.
Did he?
Yeah,
I don't remember making any Pro Bowls. But there's an old saying in sports that when a star gets traded for a lot of assets, like who wins the trade? And the old saying is like, well, the team that gets a star wins the trade because they got the best player in that deal. And I think when you're looking back on this, particularly with what Jared Allen did for the Vikings in the 6 years that he was there, the Vikings did win this trade. And oh, by the way, that sixth rounder that they swapped positions with the Chiefs, they selected John Sullivan with that pick, who ended up being a real solid starting center for the Vikings. For most of his career was with the Vikings. So the Vikings did pretty well in that trade. And when the Vikings traded for Jared Allen, it filled a really big need, because in 2007, you remember the Vikings, this was the second year of the Chile administration. They went 8-8. They were kind of in the playoff wild card thing, but they couldn't rush the passer. They only had 36 sacks that year. Nobody had more than 5 sacks on the whole team. They needed an edge rush or a defensive end who had to be accounted for. And Jared Allen was that guy. He immediately transformed that defense and became a guy that every team had to account for. And we know he went with double-digit sacks every year. He was with the Vikings during that time. And the Vikings sack production jumped by 10 the first 2 years that Jared Allen was with the team, in 2008 and 2009. And they made the playoffs both of those years, and made the NFC Championship in 2009. And if the Saints hadn't cheated, they would have won that year. So, you know, Allen had a big impact on that defense, which had a lot of really good parts at the time, but it was missing a dominant pass rushing force. They got that with Jared Allen. He really, on the outside.
Williams play right next to him.
On the inside, yeah. But on the outside, they needed that guy. And Jared Allen was definitely that guy. And when I think about Allen, Drew was talking about what's your favorite memory or game. I mean, there's a bunch of them. There's really no game that stands out, because it seemed like every game Allen did something that stood out. And the thing I remember about him that made him so good is that he was kind of a weird, you had a photo of him earlier on there, Dave. He was 6'6", but he didn't have the... Yeah, that was the one. It was a couple of shots before, but he was 6'6", so he had the length of that's the one. But you look at his arms there, Dave. He didn't have like the huge like guns that defensive linemen, defensive ends sometimes have. He didn't have the big huge legs that they had. But Allen still got it done, obviously. And the thing that seemed to separate him from everybody else was his motor. Like, he just did not stop from when the ball was snapped until the whistle was blown, or even after. He was relentless in his pursuit of the quarterback or the running back or whoever had the ball. But the thing about that was that he wasn't like mindless, a big zombie in that madman mentality. He had a plan to what he was going to do, and he just didn't run 110 miles an hour without a thought. He had a pass rush plan. So you couple the motor with his ability and his pass rush moves. He wasn't a guy who was known for the bull rush, but he could get a lot of things done if he had to, and he did. And just one of the funnest players that I ever watched in a Vikings uniform. And he was a guy that really embraced being in Minnesota as well, and really seemed to really enjoy being a Viking. That's why he's going enshrined as a Viking. And quite remarkable, because you look at him, he went to Idaho State. Who's ever heard of Idaho State? Coming into the draft, he was projected to be a 6th or 7th round draft pick. He ended up picking in the 4th round, but immediately in the NFL, he was a factor with the Chiefs and continued to be his whole career one of the top sack guys. Really should have the season sack record. He got robbed of a sack, which we learned about this week. It got brought up again, but quite something. That how did this guy with his talent get missed by so many going into college and then coming out of college and going into the pros? But just glad he was a Viking for when he was. And Dave, I'm sure you got lots of memories and thoughts about Jared Allen as well.
Oh, yes, without a doubt. We saw the highlights of talking about the games. The game is against Green Bay when he had 4.5 sacks against Aaron Rodgers. Why do you think Aaron Rodgers said, nope, he's the sack king. He got robbed, blah, blah, blah. He was, a pain. And then I'm trying to remember the Detroit Lions quarterback. He ran out.
Dan Orlovsky.
Yeah, Orlovsky, out of the end zone to get to safety. He ended his career, I think, tied with the most safeties in NFL history. It's like, wow, okay. And he's had a couple interception pick sixes, and he's done all sorts of cool stuff. He obviously deserved to be there, in my opinion. And thankfully, he is now in Canton as a Viking. And he said in his speech that it was he had to go to Minnesota. He was Norwegian by ancestry, and it was just, he was going to be a Viking, and he would go in as a Viking. And he had so many good years here. And it was just so great to see him. Now, this picture obviously was when he was put in a Ring of Honor. And he's quite the character. Who else rides a horse into the stadium to be honored? That's Jared Allen. And we remember his retirement video where he goes, I'm going to ride off into the sunset, but there's no sun out, so I'm just going to ride off. And he turns around on a horse and rides off. He's very much a very fixture of Minnesota. He's a fixture to the team and the team's history. They love when he comes to the stadium and talks to the players, comes to TCO and helps, all that. It's just, he's a good man, and he's got well-deserved getting into the Hall of Fame. It's a shame it took him so long, because remember, over the last couple of years, we were doing, he was snubbed again.
Yeah.
Stories on him. And this time he was not snubbed. Now, if we can get in a few other Vikings, Jim Marshall, and maybe even Kevin Williams. Kevin Williams was a 5-time All-Pro defensive tackle, and he barely gets mentioned. It's just, but anyways, it is what it is. Elizabeth, what are you talking about? We don't ask for it.
You can subscribe easily without paying a dime.
Yeah, we don't ask for it. So, great that he was selected and made it. I think it's great. Of course, my story that I told, I think is cool. Go to my grave with that. And it was fun. But he loved life and he loved football. And the fact that he turned around his life coming from Kansas City, where he had a few problems with alcohol, and he turned it around. He's got a beautiful family. I think it's great. Minnesota tends to do that. And we just wanted to salute him. That's all today. We're happy he's in there.
That's right. And because the more it went on that he didn't get in, with a new crop coming in every year of Hall of Fame candidates that have like a little bit fresher in the mind of voters of what they did on the field, there's no guarantees that he could have got in as things went on. And now he is in. So, hey, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, folks, that's our show for today. We hope you have enjoyed it. Any last words there, Darren? And Elizabeth, just hit the subscribe button on YouTube. You should be able to do that, and it doesn't cost you anything.
Yep. No, nothing for me to add. Just looking forward to this coming week of getting more training camp and seeing how things are progressing, particularly with the offense and JJ McCarthy. That's going to be the theme the whole training camp and preseason day, because I think we know what the defense is capable of and those guys, and we know what the offense, a lot of those guys are capable of. But the one question mark is JJ McCarthy. And I don't think you and I are too concerned, but still, we got to see it. And
got better on Friday, and it was freaking hot yesterday. He was on fire. Now, if we can get some of the receivers to stop dropping some of the footballs, we'll be all right. And that isn't too bad.
Yeah. And not only not drop them, but don't drop them and put them right into the lap of the defensive back.
All right, buddy. What do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, and thanks for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Oops, wrong button. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!